giving that very nice welcome and for coming. That's very nice of you. Well, we've been traveling around the country, we've been traveling around the state, and I'm sure glad the revolution is alive and well in Houston as well. Every once in a while, you notice that the media will come up and say, when are you going to quit? I said, where are you going to get going? They said everybody else is dropping out. I said, yeah, they ran out of money, they ran out of supporters, and nobody comes to their rallies. So the enthusiasm is obviously very great and growing. The crowds have been magnificent and the funds come in. But the message is, of course, the key issue. And we can be very pleased that it's well received. Of course, we know that it's well received by young people, but there are a lot of other people now at all age groups and all diversity, all kinds of diversity, who are enthusiastic about the liberty message. People have changed a lot in the last 4 years. We had a campaign 4 years ago. It was, as far as I was concerned, very successful. But something happened 4 years ago. Some of the things that we were talking about and warning about came about. There was a financial crisis. People know that there has an explanation for this, and they know that it has a lot to do with monetary policy and the mischief of the Federal Reserve System. Good dollar at the time in 1913, it's now worth 2 cents. I would say that along with the recession and unemployment and the rising prices, that they have come in with an F grade, they have failed, so it's time to look to something very non-complex or what to do. Why don't we just look at the Constitution and find out that gold and silver is supposed to be legal tender? These last 4 years is the discovery that American people are worn out. They're worn out with the wars, and they've come around to our assessment that we're going to war too often, too carelessly. We should do it only with a declaration of war under constitutional grounds. War is always an economic drain. Some people try to teach us in our schools that depressions and recessions are ended by going to war. That is nonsense. Always the cost of war is a depressant on the livelihoods of all Americans and all citizens. But the one thing is the American people now agree with us. 70% of the American people say, time to go home. Get home. Instead of the Republican Party, the other candidates offering a solution that is even close to ours, they were competing to try to who is the most critical of Obama and who could advocate going into another war the most. We don't need another war. We don't need to go into Syria or into Iraq. have added $4 trillion of debt. Our deficit has gone up that much in the last 10 years. Just think how much richer this country would be if we had not spent that money on wars that are not being won, that we don't even know why we're there, we don't know what the purpose is, that it doesn't provide for a strong national defense, and of course there are constitutional wars. But what if we had not fought any unconstitutional wars since World War II? Think how wealthy this country would have been. Right now, today, we are not wealthy. We're the biggest debtor in the nation. We have a middle class, which used to be the largest and the wealthiest in the history of the world, is now shrinking and getting poorer, and it has a lot to do with the foreign policy. So we need a constitutional foreign policy designed for strong national defense, bringing our troops home and getting out of these wars as soon as possible. Has been that if you don't support the wars, somehow or another you don't support the troops. The question, if anybody asks you about that, is asking them why do the troops support Ron Paul more than anybody else? I was drafted into the service in 1962 during the Cuban crisis. I remained in the Air Force. I was in for five years. But during that time, I had not thought out all the answers and questions about what foreign policy would be, but I did my very best. I went, I served, but it was only afterwards that it really dawned on me that policy is what really counts. To put our young men and women under the circumstances that we have done is so precarious. And just think of the sadness of what is happening today. The thousands being killed, the tens of thousands being wounded and injured, the hundreds of thousands now begging and pleading for help by our Veterans Administration, the post-traumatic stress syndrome, the brain injuries that are going on, the suicides that occurred, the financing of this is ongoing. This is why, when it comes to the issue of war, it's probably one of the most important things that a Congress and a president should weigh and be extremely careful not to get involved. In 1998, our policies changed. Our policy at that time changed to that of getting rid of Saddam Hussein. Even though he didn't ally of ours for many years, and we tolerated all his shenanigans in 1998 since we had to get rid of Saddam Hussein. But they didn't have enough breathing. They weren't able to get enough support for this and get the people behind it. But guess what happened? After 9/11, the support came. Remember all the stories we were told, the nuclear weapons he had, the weapons of mass destruction, he had Al-Qaeda being in there. It wasn't true. So, of course, then the big argument was that we had to go to war. I was on the international relations, and I thought, now I have a different responsibility. So they were, I could tell, obviously, the war propaganda was marching us off to war. So what I offered to the committee was, look, I don't want to go to war. I'm not going to go for this authorization where you would say the president can do whatever he wants. You want to go to war, do it the right way. Declare the war and make sure people are on record for it. The other members of the committee didn't want to have any part of it. They were very that is anachronistic. We don't have to follow that anymore. That tells you so much what the problem is all about in Washington, whether it's economic policy, monetary policy, foreign policy, the protection of your personal privacy and personal liberties. That is the reason we do not have enough people in Washington who understand and will take their oath of office seriously. So the answer should be, don't send anybody there until you're convinced they know how to read and they know how to understand and that they tell you the truth and will obey the Constitution. This certainly will take care of the monetary issue. The Declaration of War, Article 1, Section 8 is very clear. It spells out exactly what things we're allowed to do. We do need a whole lot of re-education on the Interstate Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause. But this is necessary for us to understand what the role of government ought to be. That's why we had a revolution. The revolution